Hey folks out there on Facebook, YouTube, and the socials, this is Ethan with Piano Tech Radio Hour. We're just going to start letting people into the live Zoom call here, and then we'll get started momentarily. It's lovely to have you here. We'll intro the program briefly in a moment, and then we'll get started. This show is being streamed out there on the socials as well as in a live Zoom call with a private audience. If you would like to join the private audience, keep an eye out on the chats on the socials, and we'll try to get some links out there so you can join the Zoom call and get a little bit closer to the action. As always, questions and comments are welcome either via chat or raising your hand and potentially participating in the conversation. Doesn't always happen, and there's no pressure, but do know that's an option. And I would recommend a comment in the chat first just to feel something out, and then we can talk more. All right, we are going to intro the program, and then we're going to tell you about our amazing guest for the day. So this is Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can also subscribe to Radio Hour. That's just $16 a month. You get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as all the archival recordings of over 200 episodes in our member area. Join using the link bit.ly/joinptrh. That's bit.ly/joinptrh. And then, of course, we always like to plug the audio-only podcast, which is at pianotechradio.com. Our blog at pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com, and our socials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. You can get on the email list to find out more about what programs are coming up if you just go to pianotechniciansmasterclass.com and enter your name and email. All right, I am going to introduce our fine guest for the day. Her name is Linda Dachtyl. She's a performer and composer and a former adjunct instructor at Kenyon College and Ohio Wesleyan University. She leads the LD B3 Quartet and the QED Jazz Piano Trio, and her recordings Blue Bop and Four Hep Cats both charted nationally on JazzWeek. Linda has performed across a wide range of settings, from big bands and orchestras to small group jazz and informal sit-ins, and has collaborated with artists including Blue Lou Marini, Trudy Pitts, Gene Ludwig, Tony Monaco, and Bobby Floyd, among many others. Linda, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Getting over a little bit of the holiday, whatever. I mean, every once in a while I gotta, clear my throat here, but I'm doing fine. The bio that you have is a little older.
Oh, okay.
And then that's fine. But basically, I do some piano work, more on a private basis. But I have like 3 or 4 Hammond bands at any given time. Excuse me. And I have a trio and a quartet with sax, and then I have a tribute project to Charles Earland, the organist, R&B, jazz, that kind of thing. And I delve in prog rock. You can see from my background, I have a bunch of keyboards up there. And other than that, it was pretty accurate. I'm with Summit Records and Chicken Coop Records. I have 5 releases out, 4 in the jazz organs genre and 1 in the progressive rock genre.
Wonderful. Well, we were talking a little bit before we got started here about Chicago, where I'm at, and the sort of legacy there. Of course, the Hammond has a legacy here. And you talked about visiting Chicago, visiting some of the old factory buildings and things. Yeah, there's actually a a factory building that's got a pretty cool setup right now. I'm trying to think of the name of it. I'll think of it. But 4200, something like Workshop 4200. And it's an old Hammond B3 warehouse and factory. They do still have some instruments just kind of laying around because that's what it was, and they're there. And then there is a guy who has a shop in the building still that refurbishes Hammond B3s. So that's kind of cool, and you can go there and you can visit him and get an instrument. And then the rest of the place these days is actually pretty cool. They have basically what amounts to small rental units of varying sizes for studios. And it could be a guy who makes videos and podcasts like we do. It could be a woodworking shop. It could be something artisan. There's a coffee roaster there. It's a really cool spot. So I actually enjoy hanging out there. I've tuned a couple pianos there, made friends with the management, but it is fun to be able to see the legacy stay alive. There's also places where there's a place in Michigan as well, which is an old piano factory, which it's basically condos now. So I like the vibe of the Workshop 4200. They've got some of the culture remaining there and some of the fun and creativity going on. But yeah, have you visited Chicago often? Do you tour much, or are you mostly playing locally there in Ohio?
Well, for now, mostly in Columbus and around the state of Ohio. Now, I
Yep.
haven't ventured out, since the lockdowns. Okay, but I did play the Pensacola Jazz Festival, Pensacola, Florida, with Lulu Marini, and that was a dozen years ago. And then I've done most of my touring more as a side musician. I played for a long time with the blues band with Teeny Tucker fronting. We did California and Canada and whatever. But as far as the jazz organ stuff, it's pretty much, Ohio based, but it can be more than that.
Let's take a listen to some of your music. I have a handful of videos here that we can select from. Do you remember what you gave us? Do you have a preference for a first look?
Well,
First
I
listen?
have some live video, and then I do have one selection from my newest release. I think I shared that with you. That would have the train painting on.
Yeah, full steam ahead.
Yeah, go ahead and play that one. I mean, it's not, it's just a picture there, but you'll get an
Yep.
idea of where I'm coming from on the Hammond.
Yeah, let's check that out. Get a little foundation. Go full screen on that. And we'll take a listen. Come on now. All right, some grooving stuff. So unmute yourself. You're muted still. Let's get you unmuted.
Thank you. I wasn't sure what I sent you. I use that as a promo for my latest release, Full Steam Ahead.
Okay.
And so I mean, yeah, it's a little lengthy. It was just kind of a sampler.
Okay.
If people want to purchase a CD, which I still sell those, and then they're at all the streaming and the download sites and such. But anyway, well, thank you for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So tell me what I actually usually do this, but I didn't do it with you up front.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to people's childhood and find out where they first got in touch with music and
Okay.
when it started to be a career or look like a focus of your life. Do you remember? Did it start with a different instrument besides the Hammond?
Well, it actually started with organ, okay, and well, my parents. I mean, my mother's still with us. My father passed in 2020, but they, yeah, I mean, they saw that I had interest in music because when I grew up, back in the, you know, 70s, 60s, 70s, it was very, very much a prestige thing for people to have a nice stereo system in their homes. And my parents, they dabbled at music. Mom took some piano lessons, and then Dad played a little bit in the school band, and that kind of thing. But not anything beyond that. Just enjoyed music. They were part of the supper club generation. Couples go out, to these places and hear music. Part of that was part of their social life, and I just wore the stereo out, me and my sisters, and so Dad and Mom saw that I had an interest in music just from playing their records all the time, and they had a pretty extensive LP collection, especially for people that aren't musicians. I mean, I don't know, maybe 200, 300 records, something like that, and uh, and so one day I was about six, and this truck showed up at our house from Sears, and inside that, was a little Silvertone organ, a two-manual organ with a bass pedal board. I mean, it was a reduced size. I don't remember what the keyboard size was, but I know that I took lessons on that for maybe 3 or 4 years, and grew out of it. As the music got more complicated. And then I studied with two brothers that owned a Lowry dealership in Dover, Ohio, Phil and Dave Petro. And Phil and Dave Petro were supper club organists. They weren't really jazz organists. I mean, from what I remember of them playing, but they taught me. They taught me really how to read lead sheets. They didn't tell me they were doing this, but all of the pop tunes. I mean, I remember one of the first lessons I took with them. This just came to mind was Tom Jones' Delilah. Okay, and they showed me an accompaniment for that, and they just pull out the piano, vocal, guitar music, which was like three stabs. Like, well, how am I going to play that? And they said, oh, no, 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 just read the top line, and well, what's that EM mean? Oh, that's E minor, and that is like this. And so it was kind of like that. So it wasn't real traditional. Now I have had traditional study too, but the thing is that I had that non-traditional study so early that I started learning chord language, and it was just fun. I mean, I didn't think about being a music major or any of that stuff until I was in high school. But there was one real pivotal thing for me that made me want to get really serious. Okay. And again, had to do with my mom and dad's social circle. They played cards with a couple quite often. And this other couple had a daughter about 3 years older than me. And they had just bought her a new quadraphonic stereo system. Okay. Whatever, I mean, it wasn't like, a huge thing, but she had a lot of nice records. And one of them was Fragile by Yes. And I said, Oh, well, I've got that 45 of Roundabout. I'd like to listen to that. And so, she puts it on. She was not babysitting my sisters and I quite, but, she was trying to get us, occupied with that. And I just was absolutely knocked out. And because, I had the little 45, so I thought that was a song, and it comes in, and I know what these things are now, but comes in with that backwards piano, like that. And it was like, wow, 8 minutes to that song. Wow. And then went on and on. And she ended up apologizing. She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry these songs are so long." I said, "Oh, no, that's just fine." And so she flipped the record over and we listened to the whole thing. And I sat there and I read the liner notes, and it's like, well, what's this Mellotron thing? Okay. What's this Moog, which, I mean, it's Moog, but, it was like, what is all that stuff? And I would say that that was probably one of the, you know, one of the most important things, was being introduced to that. And that led to me, having interest in progressive rock. And Just perchance, I subscribed to Downbeat when I was about 11 or 12 years old. We used to have magazine sales at school. And so I asked mom and dad, "Oh, can we buy a couple?" And, dad got whatever he wanted, and mom and me, and I wanted Downbeat because I thought, well, that sounds cool. I mean, I didn't know anything about jazz. I mean, I knew the word and that, and I would read about these people. Just Buddy Rich I knew about. I had seen him on the Tonight Show and that kind of thing. I knew about Buddy Rich, and then I started seeing Maynard Ferguson on the PBS specials, and that was very exciting. That was his, I think it was his English band. Yeah, I think it was, around the Live at Jimmy's release. So, yeah, I mean, date myself. It was probably about 1974 or five, and and I was excited about that because Maynard played a lot of rock stuff, rock, jazz, fusion, but he'd play standards too. And so I would say that those two gateways, this Fragile album, and then seeing Maynard Ferguson on PBS were probably really, really important. And
That's very interesting.
I still do both those genres to this day. I mean, I kind of got bit by the bug, when I was a middle school or so, and been very consistent, even though I've played a lot of different genres, and just but as far as my passion and love, it's for jazz and it's for progressive rock.
Yeah, that's actually quite an interesting start. Because a lot of people start on a piano, the actual acoustic piano instrument. And it's interesting that you kind of got started on the organ and then kind of grew from there and then moved to the keyboards and things like that. That's pretty interesting.
It was kind of my parents made that decision because I didn't even know that the instrument was on the way. I hadn't said, "Oh, I want to have a piano or an organ or something." But my grandmother had a piano in her house, and I probably sat there and pounded on it and drove them crazy. So it's like, oh, maybe she should play a keyboard instrument of some kind.
Yeah. Now, what a fun world that you got wrapped up in there too. I mean, just that. I mean, so what decade then did you start to perform publicly?
Okay, well,
80s? 70s?
yeah, well, as far as professionally,
Yeah,
uh, the late 70s.
late
Okay,
70s.
yeah,
What a
and
great time. I mean, so much uh, creative explosion as far as I look back on it. My brothers were a bit older, of course I had older brothers, and then all the stuff you're talking about, except the jazz. What's interesting is they just didn't get jazz, and they were just rock guys, but I got exposed to all that and yes, and you know, all this sort of progressive kind of stuff as well. But but yeah, it was a it was such a cool creative era. Like I always think of the 60s and 70s especially. You had some jazz things going on, you had fusion, there was like the alternative cultures coming online, and it was quite an explosion. So you must have had a lot of fun just kind of getting out there and being in the scene and playing music and mingling with folks, right?
Yeah,
That was
well,
also before, before the time of the internet, right? So
oh
people
yeah,
wanted to go out, they wanted to go to
right.
clubs, they wanted to listen to music, like that was what you did, right?
Yeah, and the thing is that my actual first professional quote unquote, meaning that I got paid.
Hmm.
Okay, I was 17 years old and I had to have somebody sign for me. I played in the percussion section of the Dominic Greco Memorial Concert Band in Dover, Ohio, and you had to join the musicians union to do that, and so I did. And it's like, oh wow, I guess you can get paid doing this too. So I was exposed to that like really early on. And uh, and then I started actually playing in bands when I was in college. Okay, that was a year or two later, and a lot of that was just bands to make money. Like wedding bands that would play at country clubs and stuff. And I didn't really start to like play in rock bands per se because I just didn't have time as a college student. I would say probably about 1980. I don't know, 83, 84. Okay.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
there were some things that were short lived prior to that. Um, well, but it was more in the society circles. It wasn't like too much rock. I mean, we could play a few rock songs, but, it was a lot more softer music, which paid the bills, but, it didn't excite me too much, until I actually got, more into the jazz. But, yeah, and then I started building my keyboard stuff up, and I'm not a hoarder of these instruments, but with me, playing Hammond, I got my first Hammond when I was probably about probably about 13, because that those brothers in Dover, Ohio, they had a Lowry dealership, and my parents bought that Lowry, and then I heard the Hammond later, and it was probably the recordings for me was maybe Oye Como Va by Santana starts
Yeah.
off with that thing, and
Oh
then
yeah.
Lee Michaels, California guy, he had one hit called "Do You Know What I Mean," but he also had a live album that had "Stormy Monday" on it, and I never heard anything like that. I mean, and I knew Lee from that "Do You Know What I Mean" song. It was kind
Hmm.
of funny and it was cool, and Stormy Monday, it was just Lee Michaels and a drummer that ended up. He played with a guy named Frosty, but on this album, this was actually a live album. It was the fellow that ended up playing with the Doobie Brothers. I think it was Keith Knudsen. It was just him and Lee, and they played Stormy Monday. And Lee, he made that thing sound like a thunderstorm in the beginning, and then very soulful singing. And I was just like, oh, I told Bob and Dad, I said, I want a Hammond organ, and so they sold the Lowry, and we got the difference and bought a Hammond. And
Mm,
so
nice.
I always had that, and then I'd always as a kid look at the the magazines from Moog and ARP and all that, and I was like, oh man, love to have one of those. But I couldn't afford that, so I just played the organ, and then I played drums in the school band, and I'm still active as a drummer too. More in the cover band world and that. But I just had an interest in synthesizers, and then when the '80s hit, and I started to have some money, about mid '80s, I was whatever, I was starting to work and adult life and stuff. I found old synths that people didn't want in the music stores. When the DX7 came out, it's like people dumped everything. And I found an ARP Odyssey in a music store for $150, and I bought it, and I still have it, and it works. I haven't had to put a lot of work into it. And then toward the end of the '80s, I ended up buying a Mini Moog just through an ad in the paper, because I always wanted those things when I was a teenager. And it's like, I mean, I had the money then, and I had, people thought you're crazy buying that stuff. It's like, well, that's okay, I can be crazy, and and then it just went from there, with the digital. I mean, I'm not a Luddite. I mean, I will record with the analogs. I won't take them out. They're too temperamental, and it's just too much gear. When I can, like in my little thing that's behind me, I'll tell you what those things are. I mean, the lowest one on the left is the XK3C Hammond organ, which I endorsed through Hammond USA. Okay, and that was one of my trips to Chicago. I got set up with that. And then the thing on top is a CP 33, I believe, Yamaha. Very nice, very realistic piano samples. And then behind my head on top is Yamaha AN1X synthesizer, which is, kind of that's a 1998 synth. I bought it new. And, it's kind of like, a sensible Mini Moog or Nord or whatever. I mean, it's a analog digital hybrid. And then I have a digital Mellotron underneath that. And then on the bottom, I have, now this is the thing that I got into about 10 years ago, the soft synth virtual stuff. That and a laptop. I mean, I've got like a freight train full of keyboards, plus all the symphony orchestra members riding on that train.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not the real deal, but it's like the stuff is so good now. I can't believe it, as far as what's available sound wise. I mean, things that, as a kid, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to stand it, to have a laptop and this little thing, and it's like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's all just right there for me. So,
Yeah, it's pretty amazing these days. Let's check out another recording.
okay.
Let's see what we got here. We've got the highlights from the Italian festival. We've got the city lights. We've got
City Lights
South
is
Leland.
particularly good. Okay.
Okay. All right.
And I want to just preface that for a minute. Okay.
Sure.
That's Jimmy McGriff's song, and I studied with Hank Marr, who was very, very well known. I mean, when people talk Hammond organ, mostly people know about Jimmy Smith right away or Joey DiFrancesco. I mean, those
Sure.
are names that most people will know, but Hank Marr was with King Federal Records in Cincinnati. He replaced Bill Doggett when Bill Doggett went on the road. Bill Doggett was of the honky tonk fame, and he had an organ career too. But Hank was kind of one of those unsung heroes here in Columbus, but had national respect. And he covered Jimmy's City Lights. And what's nice about that, there's two guitar players. Sean Carney, I work with as a side musician, and that's not a vocal tune, but he's the front guy. And then the other guy in the video that's playing guitar is a fellow named Tom Carroll, who was a close personal friend of Hank. He taught at Ohio State University, professional jazz guitarist, and he said, "I want to do City Lights," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I mean, I was, very pleased to do that. It was like an honor to Hank, you know,
Hmm.
and so I just wanted to, preface that a little bit with the background because, I mean, getting the A-OK from, okay,
Go ahead.
did we lose
Finish up.
something? Okay, but yeah, getting the A-OK from Tom, who actually recorded that song with Hank. I mean, you can't do much better than that, so I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, let's take a listen. All right.
Yeah. Let's
Very
see.
nice.
I'm on. Okay, yeah, yeah, boy. I tell you that I mean, it would be nice if the audiences were that excited every time. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. That meant a lot to me, that performance, for a whole lot of reasons. I mean, because I studied with Hank, and Tom over on the left side played with Hank. He actually he actually was on my first recording, Blue Bob. Tony Monaco produced that. Tony Monaco is a famous name in the B3 world. He's a Columbus fellow here. And Hank Marr died in 2004. And, and Tony started up his record label, Chicken Coop Records, right around that time. Um, and they're linked in with Summit Records out in Arizona. And he said, I'm going to do a tribute to Hank, because we all loved Hank. And he said, I want you to do some on your first CD. So I had Tom and Jim Rupp, uh, who played with Hank, and then Gene Walker, the late Gene Walker, on tenor saxophone, on some Hank Marr tribute numbers that went on my first CD. Uh, Hank had these spoon songs. The Greasy Spoon was the most famous of his, and then he had another one called Silver Spoon, which I recorded. Okay, and then I found out last couple of years he had one called Soup Spoon, which I didn't. I don't know what it was about these spoon things, and diner food. We play a song of his called Home Fries, and whatever. But Hank was a wonderful person, and I learned an awful lot from him. So.
Wonderful. Um, Tell me about the organ itself, approaching the instrument. So, I mean, I've played a little bit of organ, but it's, when you're playing in B3 and you got the tone bars and maybe you got a Leslie speaker or they get the pedals to work with, that's a lot to keep track of and to kind of develop an understanding of how the sounds, how to craft the different sounds you want to do and to mimic what you hear on the records. What kind of principles have you found in optimizing your use of the instrument?
Well, the first thing, it's like when I decided I wanted to do this, uh, to really do it. year 2000. I mean, I had done some combo organ work, whatever, little Hammond clone or, whatever. I think it was old Krumar piece from the original Krumar company. Um, but I just learned that, excuse me, I'm going to take a drink here. I just learned that with the organ stuff, I could, give the 5 minute lesson on it that really applies. Okay, across the board. As far as the drawbar registrations on the organ, okay, and I'm going to talk in the context of a B3 because this works quite well. Okay,
Okay.
um, you've got those black keys on the side. Okay, and the B flat or A sharp preset key. See the reversed ones over there. I mean, I can't quite point to it, but you set that one up with all the drawbars pulled out. That's that loud, super loud sound. And then the B preset key right beside it, it controls the next set of drawbars over. And generally, what you do with that, you pull out the first three to like maximum, which is 8. 8 is the number for Hammonds to the 10. I don't know why, but you pull out those three, and you use something called percussion, which is really the percussion thing is really just kind of like the harmonics of like a xylophone or marimba, and their second or third harmonic percussion. You choose for Jimmy's sound, you choose the third harmonic percussion, and then that's Jimmy's sound, and a lot of rock people will use that. So that's where to start with those. And then what I've found over the years, there's all kinds of registrations that
I'm going to I'm opening up an image here,
okay, very good.
just so we can have a visual on it. Now, I
All
don't know if
right.
this is the same as what you're talking about, but
Yes, it
just
is. In fact, that's very good. That's a very good illustration there. But what I'm talking about now, that's a DAW thing. On a real Hammond, you would have 4 sets of those 9 drawbars instead of just the 2.
so
So
these drawbars here.
yeah, you would have like 2 more sets over there. But other than that,
Wow.
that
Okay.
looks that looks very, very realistic. And those 4 tabs on the right side, those are on a B3. That is your percussion unit. Okay,
Okay.
and then Jimmy Smith's sound, which is the most common, is on, and then soft, and then the fast decay, and third harmonic percussion, and they call that 4 up, meaning that those 4 tabs are pressed in. That's just organist slang.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then over to the left is the chorus unit. Okay, you've got 3 tabs there. You got and the chorus unit is usually set to C3. Okay, you've got like chorus settings C1 2 3 and vibrato settings of V1 2 3, and people hardly use the vibrato settings. That's a little more of that soap opera organ sound. Okay, but
Right.
Smith used that chorus unit on C3, and then the Leslie itself would either be turned off or fast. Now, um, there's some things. Now, I like to use chorale, but there's a lot of purists that think, oh, chorale's awful. And I actually, talk to people in the tech world about this. Excuse me, because Jimmy's recordings came out. Okay, the 2-speed Leslie, I don't think was developed until probably late 50s, early 60s. Now, I mean, somebody can probably Google that and say, well, no, that's not quite right. But anyway, any of the Leslies that are below number 100 only had like off or fast, and then the
And we're
ones that are
talking, just to clarify here, we're talking about this down here at the lower left, the rotary
yes, that
speed,
is
right?
correct. That is correct. And so the jazz organ, probably the definitive sound for jazz organ, what was to have nothing, and just let the chorus unit color it, and then fast. And I think that that's more of a historical thing. That's my opinion because chorale came a little later, and those are Leslie's that are at least number 100 on up. It has to have 3 digits on it for that. And
And that's a sep. So on this image, we see slow, break, and fast. Is chorale a different speed?
yeah,
What is that?
okay, slow. Okay, slow is the chorale. Okay,
Oh,
because
okay.
and they may have changed the names on it, but basically when that's a three-way Leslie switch, most of them are two-way, but the left side is usually slow or chorale. Okay, and that's the slow spin. Some of them won't have that thing in the middle. I think it says break, and that means off. I mean, the Leslie is, the Leslies aren't spinning at all, the horns. And then over to the right is the fast tremolo, and that's that thing. Now, like in that City Lights thing that I played, okay, I had a registration. This is called the Squabble or Errol Garner registration, and it's the first drawbar out, nothing out until the last four, and it's kind of a shrill sound. Yeah, it's like the first drawbars at 8, and then the next two are nothing, and then the last four would all be pulled out, and it creates a, I don't know what I could say. It's just a different sound. And a lot of people do this with more Errol Garner technique of, big block chords and that kind of thing. But, where the crowd got excited, it's like, I have some of those drawbars pulled in, and then, you got to choreograph and put some pedals down, put your hand up there, and then, pull the other ones out. Yeah, and at that City Lights thing, I had it all pulled out, to, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, all 9 drawbars. I mean, that's the biggest sound you get out of a Hammond, and so that's
So okay. So and then just to clarify,
sure.
these are the primary ones you're talking about. You pull those all out, and
That's correct.
that's for just one register of the keys. And
That's
then
correct.
here for the pedals, pedals just have two drawbars. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Pedals usually what people do with the pedals. Oh, well, they'll probably pull the first one out, which is a 16-foot stop to, all the way out to 8. And I rarely use the next one over, which is an 8-foot stop. Yeah, that might be more for like, playing soft hymns, during a offertory or something like that. But I rarely.
These are also pedal
Okay,
drawbars.
no, the ones on the right there are for the lower manual. Okay,
Okay, good.
and what that setting is there.
Oh, I see. I see.
Yeah,
This is a group here, the lower group.
yeah. What happens with that is that's a good bass registration all the way out, and then to 3 or 4, and then all the way out, and nothing else. And that's used to play left-hand bass. And basically, I think some people have a wrong conception sometimes about what jazz organists do. Now, there are people that play full pedals. In fact, Barbara Dennerling, a German woman, she has a MIDI rig, so she's playing more like a real pipe organist would, 2-footed and playing her bass lines all with her feet. And the other one is Rhoda Scott, okay, and she has a string bass unit. But Jimmy Smith, the way he came up through that thing was he put everything on the lower manual with the left hand, and then he would do this thing with the pedals. If it was up tempo, he would do this where you don't actually play them, but you just kind of tap them really fast, like tuck, 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 and that emulates it. That emulates like kind of the pluck of a string bass. And the only time like jazz organists, I mean, when I say the only time, somebody will find it, for instance, not, but in general, jazz organists will play their bass as left-hand bass, walking bass lines, and then reinforce with the pedals to give it more oomph. But you got to get on that pedal and off, and somehow the ear does not hear the tone of that unless you lay on that pretty fast. You just hear the click of the attack. And then if an organist is playing a ballad, which would be a little bit more theater organ style, where the pedals are actually running the bass, and the left hand will actually play chords on the manual, lower manual, and then whatever you do on the upper, so that's a little bit more traditional organ playing to play ballads. But that's the thing. When I first went to see Hank Marr play, um, I just I went to a club, and the B3, you could see his feet, and I'm like, yeah, I'd see his feet moving a little bit, but not much, and it was like, where's all this walking bass coming from? I couldn't figure it out, and when I took lessons with him, he told me how that was, but I was like, does he have like? I mean, I knew that he didn't have like some automatic tracks or anything like that, but from me watching his feet, he'd just be like on a low C pedal going ding, 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 ding like that, and I hear all this do 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 do. It's like, well, how's he doing that? And then he showed me that, when I
So it
took.
was so you're saying basically he's using one of these manuals here for the actual bass line.
That's correct. The lower
But
man.
here down here he's just kind of picking a key, probably even maybe the lowest, so it makes a less intrusive sound, and then he's pulling the pedal bars out to give it that a high end, and he's just tapping on it, so you get a little bit of a click, and it makes it sound like the bass, like a
Yeah,
bass string's being plucked on an upright bass, yeah?
yeah, it's an illusion, and the
Ah,
thing is if you press that pedal in a little bit too long, you are going to get the tone. But if you
right.
don't, you'll just hear like put, 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 and then that puts that little accent on what you're playing, with your left hand in the lower manual. And Jimmy Smith discovered that, as far as I know, historically. Um, he locked himself. I guess what he did was he bought himself a Hammond, locked himself in a warehouse for 6 months. That's the legend. And then he came out and recorded live at the Baby Grand, and took the whole world by storm. you know.
Hmm.
But that's kind of the history of how jazz organ got started. Was really with
Usually
Smith.
it's they go make a deal with the devil at the crossroads. That's
Well,
what they have a story that they
right.
lock themselves in a room or whatever, but really deal with the devil at the crossroads.
Yeah, well, Smith. Yeah, I've heard that warehouse story, and I mean, that's the thing. I think that's been documented, but the thing about the Hammond world is, the it's a small world. I mean, I don't know every single jazz Hammond organist in the country personally, but I probably know about them, just because they play. And plus, with the advent of social media, I mean, it's like you just go look, oh, they got a Facebook page, either personal or business, or all the socials and stuff. But it's kind of like being in the bassoonist club. It's like,
Right, right.
as opposed to like everybody that owns a Les Paul, which is thousands of people, and that. So I mean, and a lot of these stories I heard from techs, guys that work on the organs, and women, and that. But techs, because they knew these people. It's like, the guy that redid my organ. Now, unfortunately, he passed in 2016. He was fairly young too, but he did backline for like Jimmy Smith, he and Joey DeFrancesco, and and rock acts too. Although he was kind of the guru guy on repair. His name was Sal Azzarelli, and there's kind of a there's some techs that in fact my tech now, John Doyle, up in Detroit, Michigan. I don't know that he was directly trained by Sal, but with these little networks of things, it's like they all know each other, and it's like that was kind of a safeguard for me too when I first got on the internet in the late '90s and started investigating and trying to find these people with common interests, and but the Hamtech list is pretty much dead. I mean, Facebook has killed so much of that stuff, but somebody would find an eBay thing and excuse me, and put it up there, and you'd have three or four texts saying, yeah, well, that's a little shoddy work, and that's this, that, and the other. So it was a little bit of protection too for people like me. That I mean, I can solder a drawbar wire, but and oil the organ. You have to oil it. That's another thing about a true Hammond. It's got clockworks in it, and it's just inventor. I mean, Hammond himself was not a musician. He was a clockmaker, and oh, there's like paraphernalia. Whatever these gadgetries. There was a whole line of clocks. I have one. I mean, there was a whole line of clocks. They're like antiques now, and they bring high dollar. And then he had like some kind of card shuffler or whatever. He was just kind of one of these, kind of scientific minded guys, and he came up with this idea of the Hammond to give churches an option to that couldn't afford pipe organs or they were too small, and to get away from that, the pump reed organ thing, and this was just a new thing, and it was meant to be the new church organ, back in 35, whenever they were
Change
first.
the world.
Yeah, for real.
Well, we only have a couple more minutes here left. It's been a lot of fun diving deeply into the organ world. I especially appreciated the tutorial on the interface and how you approach the sounds and things.
Well, I would usually don't get that technical, but since it's called technicians, I thought
Let's
I would.
do it. Let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah. So
And I've played mostly emulators. I had the VK7, the Roland
yeah.
VK7, over a decade ago, and that sounded pretty good. But I did get into it. It's an enjoyable instrument to get into, especially if you play jazz.
hmm
So before we roll out, do you have any last minute requests? You want to share a website or a social thing or an
Okay.
event coming up? What do you got?
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm kind of in the booking part of my year. I don't have anything until March. As far as my jazz gigs, I'm playing a timpani gig tomorrow at a church. And then I've got some time off. We generally, Carrie and I, my husband and I, Carrie Dachtyl, we work as musicians, and we kind of let it go a little bit light in January because we've been like going hard at it. Especially in December, and we kind of pick it up, late February, whatever. But my socials, okay, I'm on Facebook. I don't really deal too much with the other ones. There's just not enough time. I actually have a personal page, and I'll accept friend requests there. But I also have a business page. That you know, and there's not that much difference between the two. I might have more pictures of my cats on the other page, and the other one's just about music. So I've got Facebook, and then our website is www.dactyl, spelled Dactyl. And that's where I do my hard copy CD sales. If people are still interested in that, and I mean, I still do that, and so that's the best contacts for me.
Perfect. A very fitting name as well, because the dactyls are the fingers, right? And that's your craft. I love it. Sometimes it's on the nose like that for our lives.
Sure.
All right. Well, I will walk us out. Like I said, it's been a pleasure having you and exploring this world. And that will have been a end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. So thank you again for joining us today. As always, we're brought to folks by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. It's cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving their homes. And for those of us that joined today for just signing up for this session individually, they might make their life more convenient by subscribing. PTRH is just 16 bucks a month. Get recording of today's session in our member area, as well as all automatic registrations for each week's new session. Sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. And we don't want to forget about the podcasts, the blog, the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and signing up for the email list on our website with just your name and email. And with that, I will conclude today's episode. Linda, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
We'll
you,
see everyone
Ethan.
else next week.